Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM. I come to you every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock. Get to introduce you to some fascinating people, and tonight is one of the most fascinating, a really interesting gentleman by the name of Nick Kouvalis. Nick has worked in political campaigns since 2004. You've undoubtedly heard his name on numerous different campaigns in the past. Between 2004 and 2008, he also built Canada's first at-home virtual call center business, Campaign Support Limited. In 2008, he joined Campaign Research, a full-service market research firm. He has served as a strategist and advisor to Rob Ford, the BC Liberals under Christy Clark, and John Tory, to name just a few. Nick, how are you? Welcome to our show.
I'm great. Thank you for having me. How are you?
My pleasure. It's an honor to chat with someone as knowledgeable as you in politics and polling and whatnot. And you just came back from Greece, I understand.
I did. I got to get there this summer. So
how does a guy leave Canada in the middle of COVID-19 and go to Greece and travel through the Greek islands? I want to know. What's your secret, buddy?
Well, I mean, it's a little business that I'm starting to build there, and it has to do with bringing foreigners, Canadians, North Americans, Americans and Canadians to Greece to sail around on catamarans in the islands of Greece. So something I've been doing every year. I'm working on getting my captain's license and my commercial license, and hope to retire there one day and do that.
Fantastic. Sounds good. Okay, so let's go through different political questions if we could. Let's start with Toronto. What do you think's going on in Toronto? How do you think Mayor Tory has been doing?
Oh, I think Mayor Tory's done a pretty good job over the years. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown a bit of a wrench into some of the things that he had planned that he wanted to do in the last 2 years of this term. But, the right guy at the right time to lead the city lead the bureaucracy and the city government through the pandemic. John spends a lot of time, as we all know, going to many events almost every single day. Very rarely takes a weekend off. I think once a month he'll take a day and a half off, and that's by force, I think, more than anything. So he's in touch with the city. He knows what it needs, and we have a conservative government in Ontario and a liberal government in Ottawa. And when Mayor Tory became mayor of Toronto, we had a conservative government in Ottawa and a liberal government in Ontario. So he's probably the best person to bridge, because he doesn't play the partisan politics. He does what's best for Toronto, and he has relationships on both sides of both parties.
He was leader of the Progressive Conservative Party in Ontario. How does he not be partisan?
He hasn't been, though. I think if you talk to conservatives, they'll say that they're not really too keen on John because he's too liberal. And if you talk to liberals, they'll say, well, we like him, but we can't really trust him because he was the leader of the Conservative Party at one point in his life. But I think it's fair to say that he's got good relationships, both provincially, federally, both with conservatives and with liberals. And he's been the best choice for Torontonians in the last few years.
It's a little bit strange that you worked for Rob Ford, former mayor, obviously now deceased, and then John Tory. What was that like as a going from one campaign to the other?
Well, I mean, I helped. I ran the campaign in 2010 for Rob Ford from about April till October. I wasn't the first campaign manager; I was the fourth. So they didn't fire me because they didn't want to have a fifth. So I made it through there, and then Rob Ford and I became good friends. He asked me to be his chief of staff, and I did that for a few months too. Not being from Toronto, that was interesting and challenging, and then from there I moved on. But at some point, I just didn't think Rob was going to be able to get reelected mayor of Toronto, and we weren't able to find out if he was or wasn't. But it looked like Olivia Chow was going to win if it was her versus Rob Ford or Doug Ford. Looked like she would win. And so when John Tory talked to me about him running, I decided to go with him because I figured he'd be the alternative that people would be happiest with. And really, my mission number one was not to let Olivia Chow become mayor of Toronto.
Why?
So, because she's a communist socialist NDPer. And
Some
so
people are
Michigan,
surprised that John Tory ran a second term. Do you think he'll run for a third term?
well, he's leaving the door open to that. And I think, like looking at recent polling, it looks like if he wants to run again, there's definitely a large swath of the citizens of Toronto that want him to run again. I don't know what he'll do in 2 years' time. He has about 2 years before the next election, maybe a little bit longer, and so he'll decide
Years
at
and
that.
1 month, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess in about 12 or 14 months, he'll have to decide.
And what do you think about the prospects for someone else? Jennifer Keesmaat, anyone else that you think might take a run at him?
Yeah, I look at the field. If let's say John Tory doesn't run, then I think we're going to see potentially one of the following three people: Mike Layton, Joe Cressy, or Adam Vaughan. I don't think any of those people will run against each other, so they'll have a fight internally about who they'll put forward. But one of those three would definitely put their name in, and I would bet it would be Adam Vaughan that does that. And then you'll have Anna Bailau, center left, center, and you'll have Michael Thompson, center right, center. And then you might have someone else who decides to put their name in, who's on the right-hand side a little bit more. So that's what I expect to see. But if Tory does stay in the race, which right now I would expect that he would run again, I still think Adam Vaughan will try to run against him. So I don't think Keesmaat can do it. And she just doesn't have the horsepower. It was pretty much a two-way race last time. She barely got the same amount of votes that Olivia Chow got. So Adam Vaughan will probably be much more potent as a opposition mayoral candidate.
And who would Nick Kouvalis be working with?
John Tory.
And if Tory doesn't run?
Anybody to stop Adam Vaughan or the left candidate.
Okay, we're going to take a break for some messages. Come back more with Nick Kouvalis in a minute. We're going to talk about Ontario politics. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting with Nick Kouvalis, who is a long-term campaign organizer, worker, pollster, and a guy that I've had dinner with a few times and drinks with a few times. And he is just the most knowledgeable guy in what's going on in politics, even though, frankly, his politics are probably not exactly mine, but we won't talk about that right now. Anyway, Nick, let's talk about Ontario. You know, I got to tell you, I was surprised at how well Doug Ford has handled COVID-19. I thought, and you know, Justin Trudeau ran against Doug Ford really during the election a year ago because Doug Ford was down so low in the polls at the time. And what he had done in the first year was really not seen positively by the Ontario population. But he seems to be a new guy, a new man, a new premier. What do you think?
Yeah, so I don't really think that he's that much different than he was. If you look at that first year, and I know what you mean, I agree with you that the second 6 months of the first year were really bad for him. But the first 6 months were actually quite good, and that goes unnoticed. So he was elected June the 7th, sworn in by July the 1st, and people were pretty happy. The polling suggests July, August, September, all the way through to December was very good for Ford. He had a honeymoon period, of course, but the approval ratings remained high. People were relatively happy with the policies that he was implementing. Really, things started to go off the rails for him in March when he announced the transit plan. There's a lot of people on the left who just wanted to fight his Ontario line transit plan, despite him being the largest transit investment. And then from there, they started digging and scratching into the budget. And, you know, this is where I think a new government, and Doug Ford has never been an MPP before, has never been a cabinet minister before. I think this is where the things went sideways with some of the big cuts, funding cuts to public health and childcare in the municipalities. And, John Tory, the mayor of Toronto, really took it to him and fought a campaign. And then that could have all been resolved too sooner. You see now when Doug gets in trouble with something, he says, okay, well, wait a second, let me step back. Let me listen to all the stakeholders, including the mayors and different councillors in different cities, and get a perspective. But with Dean French as his chief of staff, that wasn't possible because Dean is an idiot and really took Ford for a big ride down the largest ski hill he could find possible. And it is a miracle that Ford's been able to climb back up that hill and bring the whole team with him. And he's doing quite well through the pandemic. But I don't think he's changed too much. I just think he had a really bad choice in his chief of staff.
And so obviously you think the chief of staff currently is quite good.
The new guy, Jamie Wallace. Yeah, I think he's fantastic. I think he's amazing. So, he comes from the journalism side of of his career. That's where his business was, and he's a very thoughtful guy. He thinks and listens a lot more than he talks, and he commands a lot of respect in the cabinet and around senior staff, because he's very thoughtful. And the premier obviously likes him a lot. So I think they've done an excellent job turning this thing around in the last 6 months.
I was surprised that the premier was seemingly very able in bringing people together that were his competitors during the leadership campaign. He arrived on the scene so late in the leadership because of what happened with Patrick Brown, et cetera. And people seemed, the establishment seemed to be behind Caroline Mulroney or Ms. Elliott. What do you think he did to bring sort of like Lincoln's team of rivals all together?
Well, I mean, Premier Ford at the time, he was candidate Ford and leader of the party, but, he benefited extremely with no time in between the leadership race and the election. The leadership race was over on the 10th of March, and we were right into an election campaign. Within 5 days, we were starting the pre-writ portion of the election campaign. The election started on something around May the 7th. And ended on June the 7th. So there wasn't a lot of time there for, infighting. Everyone just pulled together, and he put a great campaign team together, and we went out and ran a good campaign. It certainly helps too when the Conservatives, just violently despised Kathleen Wynne's left-wing Liberal government. That sure brought everyone together too, because the alternative was letting her win. Or worse, Andrea Horwath, who has a nice smile and looks nice, but would be worse than Kathleen Wynne if she won.
I've been impressed that he's actually been listening to the science. With his comments against climate change and other things, I was thinking he wouldn't be listening to the science, and he's been listening to the scientists and seemingly following their advice through COVID-19. Is that your perception as well?
Yeah, that's been my perception throughout the whole thing. I was, before the borders were closed, I had left to go to Europe. And then the border started to close after I was already in Europe, France and Spain and stuff. And I got a phone call from him to tell me how stupid I was that I actually went to Europe, and I should have known better. And I said, well, you didn't tell me the borders were going to close, so I'm here now. But he took this thing very seriously from the beginning. And I think we all know at the beginning there was a lot of advice coming from experts and scientists, but some of that advice was very conflicting, and he had to pick and choose. So not only did he had to listen to certain key people in the province of Ontario, but the chief medical officer of the city of Toronto doesn't necessarily get on with the chief medical officer at the province of Ontario. And one of those two may not also agree with the chief medical officer for the country. So Premier Ford had to navigate all that, and navigate the cabinet federally, and also navigate, big city mayors and small city mayors in Ontario. So I think he did an exceptionally great job listening, bringing people together, and ultimately he took the advice from Dr. Williams, the chief medical officer for the province of Ontario, and they got the job done. It was bumpy at first. I mean, we didn't have the PPE, we didn't have the manufacturing ability, we didn't have a lot of things, but things went a lot better than they might have, or other people may have been predicting that they would go at this outset of this thing. So he deserves a pat on the back.
Come back to the sort of team of rivals comment that I made earlier. He seems to have developed a very good relationship with and really helped his Minister of Education. And both a year ago when union negotiations were the issue, and then now with the back to school. What do you think about the performance of the Minister of Education?
Well, I think it's been unbelievably good. So again, younger person, not to suggest that young people aren't competent. He's very competent, but he's younger. He's a new MPP, a new elected official. We got to remember that these teachers unions have gone to war with the NDP government, Bob Rae's government. They've gone to war with Mike Harris's government. They went to war with Dalton McGuinty's government, and they really went to war with Kathleen Wynne's government. And frankly, to be honest, Kathleen Wynne made some side deals that we barely found out about, only by luck, into the tens of millions of dollars to pay them off to get a deal done at the last minute. And the teachers were really pushing their luck, and COVID-19 came, and they knew to back down. They still got a 1% wage increase. We all know that inflation is going to be zero next year. So they're getting a real 1% wage increase. They're not falling behind like they were claiming that they would be. And all public servants in Ontario are capped at a 1% wage increase for wages. I think they got something in the neighborhood of 3 or 4% for benefit package increases, which is pretty significant. Now that there's a pandemic and everybody is getting less hours, lost their job, or getting mitigated hours, or getting their wages cut by 5 to 50%, teachers are getting a 4% benefits bump. And the benefits that they have already, the benefit package they have already, is one of the best in the world. So I do find it odd, because all these teachers eat, and they all went to the liquor stores when they were in lockdown, and they all went to the grocery stores, and they expected those grocery store workers to be there to serve them, and they expected the liquor store and beer store workers to be there to serve them. But now they're saying it's unsafe for them to go back to school, and I think it's a little bit selfish on their part. So I like this new latest plan where kids are going to be going to high school students. I have 3 of them. 2 are in high school, one's in university. I like this latest plan, the one that I'm seeing the most in most urban centers. And I say Windsor is an urban center too. So basically more than half the province. Kids will go to school for about 25 to 30% of the week in class, and do 65 to 70% of the week online. I like this model a lot. I think this can work. And I think the government has provided the resources to help the teachers make this work. Anecdotally, we've spoken to 2 of our teachers here that have both of my sons, who called on their own initiative to talk to us about the schedules, and now they have quadmesters instead of semesters. And so some courses are over 4 months, some courses are over 2 months, and some courses are over 8 months. And so we want to make sure that they don't have physics, chemistry, and grade 12 level math all in the same month. And the teachers are working that out. And I was very impressed with the initiative they took to call, the thoughtfulness of their call, and suggestions to make adjustments. So, it's not the teachers per se, but the teachers unions are getting a little bit out of control, and the pandemic has certainly nipped them in the bud, and I helped the Premier nip them in the bud.
How do you think Stephen Del Duca and the Liberals are doing?
Not very well. It's not really through a fault of his own. He worked hard to win the leadership, and he won the leadership, but every day we have a pandemic press conference. Every day the Premier's on the news. If it's not the Premier, it's the Prime Minister. If it's not the Prime Minister, it's a scandal that the Prime Minister's mired in. If it's not the scandal that the Prime Minister's mired in, it's a leadership contestant that might be coming in to go against the Prime Minister. And when all that fails, the steady backdrop is always Trump, right? The media will always find something to report on Trump. So Stephen Del Duca doesn't really get a chance to get in the news and make things. And that actually might be good for him, because right now, of all the people that know him, it's only his friends and family, and they're quite split on whether they like him. So if people who don't know him find out a little bit more about him, maybe a whole bunch more people won't like him. So he might actually be benefiting from not being in the news right now.
Well, given your example of Doug Ford's advantage of going straight from a leadership into election, maybe being elected 2.5 years prior to the election isn't beneficial.
It may not be. Del Duca also comes from, again, he comes from the win. So it's just going to be very, very easy for the Conservative government and Conservative candidates in an election campaign, whether that's next year or the year after, or some people even suggest the 5th year, but it's scheduled for 2 years from now. It'll be very easy to say, well, you were in Kathleen Wynne's government. You were one of her senior ministers. You made this selfish decision to build a subway all the way through your riding when we don't have the capacity to deal with the relief line yet. So he's going to have a tough time. breaking through, solidifying his base. He only has there's only 7 of them in caucus. They don't have any money. So he's going to have a real challenge. But he's polling at about 24. The NDP is polling at about 22, and the Doug Ford PCs are polling at about 48.
So some of the Liberal nomination races are already heating up. So some of the troops seem to think that there's a chance.
Sure, certainly there's a chance. There's a bunch of ridings where the Liberals, I don't believe the Liberals will stay at 7 seats. I believe that they'll come back from 7 seats. I believe primarily they'll come from the NDP, who got 41 seats, I believe. But, can't wait for Liberals and NDP to be scrapping it out in a riding that only goes NDP or Liberal. It'll be fun to watch.
Some people say if Andrea Horwath couldn't win last time, she'll never win. What do you think she should do? She should fight another election, or she should step down?
Well, I mean, personally, I'd love for her to stay where she is because she's so easy to beat. But if she wanted to do the right thing for the New Democratic Party of Ontario, she would step down immediately and allow a fulsome leadership race to begin. She can't win. She's not capable. She doesn't have what it takes. She's not tough enough. She doesn't work hard enough. And the fire's not there anymore.
We're chatting with Nick Kouvalis tonight. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back and talk federal politics. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're chatting tonight about politics, and we got Nick Kouvalis of Campaign Research, pollster, former campaign manager for Rob Ford and John Tory and numerous other people, and probably one of the most knowledgeable guys in politics in Ontario, if frankly not Canada. And I have had the opportunity to chat with him on several occasions to understand exactly what he's thinking. So, Nick, Justin Trudeau, how do you think he's doing?
Terribly. I think Justin Trudeau is probably the stupidest prime minister we've ever had and the most arrogant prime minister we've ever had. But arrogant is arguable because his dad was pretty arrogant, but his dad was smart. So the two things combined together make for a disastrous prime minister who's completely out of his depth and is mired in scandal, and he's just going to spend everybody's money to save himself or try to save himself.
This wee controversy, do you think it's a controversy?
Yeah, I think it's a big controversy when your mother gets $500,000 and your brother gets something in the ballpark. Some reports are $40,000 or $50,000, and your finance minister's daughter's working there, and you're both sitting in cabinet voting on this thing. And as it turns out, they lied completely to us. So they said that they had nothing to do with it, and it was the bureaucrats. But now all the documents that have been coming out clearly show that the bureaucrats took the direction from Minister Shagar or Shagar Bardish, I think is her name, from Waterloo, the House Leader and minister responsible for that file, and she was taking her direction from the PMO. He won a majority government against a lot of people. Thoughts he won a minority government. You don't think the guy can pull it out again? Well, I think that if you're going to look at the country, we've been a country for 152 years, and up until 152 years, the whole deficit or the whole debt of the country after 152 years was $650 billion. Justin Trudeau intends on spending more than $650 billion over a 2-year period from April 1st, 2020 to March 30th, 2022, 2-year period. He'll spend more than the accumulated debt after 152 years. And what's he spending it on? To tell us that we're all racists? To tell us that we're all xenophobes? To tell us that we're all misogynists? Because that is basically his message. He stopped telling us that he's the chief feminist of the country because he fired two women out of his cabinet. So he stopped doing that. People seem to have forgotten his blackface escapades. He can't even remember how many times he wore blackface. I think the guy needs to step down if he wants to save the Liberal Party. If not, let's have an election and let the people decide. And if the people give him another minority government, then so be it. We'll have to suffer him for another year or so.
Chrystia Freeland seems to be ready to step in at a moment's notice.
Yeah, I think she does. If someone puts a sharp object in her hand and turns the lights down, we may never see Justin Trudeau again.
What about Bill Morneau? Does he have a future?
Bill doesn't need a future. He's got hundreds of millions of dollars that his daddy left him. He's fine.
So never going to be in politics again.
If he wants to be, he can be, but I don't think he will be. I think he'll be at one of his villas that he didn't disclose to the parliamentary accountability officers.
I was surprised that Aaron O'Toole won the Conservative leadership. I thought Peter MacKay had it in the bag. What happened there?
I think everyone thought Peter MacKay had it in the bag. Full disclosure, I was doing polling for Jean Charest when Jean Charest was looking at the run at the beginning. And then I did some polling for Peter MacKay, and I did not do any polling work or any type of work for Aaron O'Toole. So I can say to you that at the beginning of the campaign, Peter MacKay was well ahead of Aaron O'Toole. But at the end of the campaign, at the end of June, beginning of July, it was clear to me at least that Aaron O'Toole was going to be the likely winner. And, Aaron put a great team together. He had a great database. He had a great call center. He had a great volunteer team. He had great training and orientation and retention processes built in to keep that team motivated. They sold a lot of memberships, and, he really played the expectations game. I mean, the expectations were MacKay was going to win and O'Toole had no chance. And the O'Toole team played those expectations to their favor. They just kept exceeding expectations in membership sales, in money raised, in volunteers amassed, in debates. They kept exceeding the expectations, and so the expectation of him losing was exceeded too, and he won.
Isn't the kingmaker Leslie Ann Lewis social conservatives, and so is he going to be typecast as a social conservative?
No. I mean, if you look carefully at the results, Peter MacKay was first on the first ballot and Aaron was second. But after the second ballot, Aaron was in first ahead of Peter. So Leslie's Lewis gave Aaron the huge victory. But if you didn't count Leslie's votes, he had already beat Peter.
So you think even if she hadn't gone, or her people hadn't gone to Aaron O'Toole would have still won?
Yeah, I think half of her people didn't vote for a second choice, and the half that did went 2-1 into Aaron's favor. So had they been 1-1, Aaron still would have won, I think.
I interviewed both Leslie Ann Lewis and Derek. I forget his name. Sloan.
I think so, Sloan. Yeah.
I was surprised at how socially conservative they were, and I did a bunch of interviews last fall during the federal election, wondering why Stephen Harper. Why. What was his name?
Andrew Scheer.
Sorry, I apologize. Why Andrew Scheer didn't win. And the concern was social conservatism didn't play in suburban Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. Is that going to happen all over again?
No, I don't think that's going to happen all over again. I think Aaron O'Toole is a guy who's, not an evangelical Christian follower. I think he's a Christian. I think he has a family. I think that, I think that he has a service record in the military, in the private sector, and as a minister. Everyone's gotten to see him, and he is a 905 MP. And so I can't see in any scenario how, if there was an election that started at the end of September and ended at the end of October, or, like the Liberals are planning, the Monday before the Tuesday U.S. election, the Monday, the 2nd of November, I can't see how Aaron O'Toole would get less votes in BC, less votes in the prairies, less votes in the GTA, less votes in Quebec than Andrew Scheer did, and less votes in Atlantic Canada. So I think that Aaron O'Toole, worst case scenario, may get less seats than maybe, perhaps. Best case scenario, he'll get Justin Trudeau. And so if Trudeau wants to roll with dice, I think we're ready to go.
So the Bloc, I think, has said they'd vote non-confidence on the speech from the throne. The Conservatives have got to vote non-confidence, I would think. So what's going to happen? Is there going to be a deal with the NDP to save the government?
I think essentially, but just to talk about the Bloc for a second, I mean, these people are separatists. They don't care if Canada stays together as a country. All they care about is themselves. To get your full MP pension, you have to do 6 years as an MP. Elections in Canada are at most 5 years apart. Usually they're 4 years apart. And in minority governments, they're usually 18 months or 2 years apart. So if the Bloc MPs voted for non-confidence now, they'd have to fight an election now. And then they would still have to fight another election in 4 years to be able to get in the time to qualify. And the Bloc MPs are new. They care about their pocketbook and their pension, and I just have no confidence that they'll vote down this government. They're going to wait till November 1st next year, and then they'll happily vote down the government, and then they'll win again, and then they'll get their pension. And then they'll be happy to take Canadians' taxpayers' money while they're claiming that Quebec should be a sovereign nation.
Jagmeet Singh, what do you think about him and how he's been doing?
I think Jagmeet Singh wears a $20,000 Rolex and drives a BMW and has no idea what it means to work hard every day for next to minimum wage. I think he's more interested in pronouns of genders than the working class individual who's struggling to keep their job and go work and make a living every day. I think he's more interested in having nice photos of him and his wife and their engagement party and their wedding party to try to outdo the Trudeaus, as they did with their photos of that couple together at the beginning, than they are about a whole bunch of tradespeople out west who don't have a job.
We have a leadership campaign within the Green Party. Are any of them going to be able to, come close to Elizabeth May and the presence that she had in the country?
I'm curious to see who the new leader will be and if they'll actually be the leader, or will Elizabeth May still control all the strings in the Green Party? Has she set it up so she's still in control of everything?
Former Minister of the Environment in the Ontario Liberal Party is running. What do you think of that?
Glenn Murray?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't really have a high opinion of Glenn. Right, when he was mayor of Winnipeg, they built a golden toilet, and he was environment minister in Ontario. He basically brought in all these regulations, and the guy, again, he thinks the money just grows on trees, and he can fund all of his projects. I mean, have you noticed in California today that nobody has power and people are dying from the heat because they have a mandated 25% has to come from green energy?
No, I didn't notice that.
The Green New Deal. It's all over the place. California has like thousands and thousands and thousands of towns and townships without power all day today because I guess it's not windy enough for the windmills to create energy.
So carbon tax, you disagree with?
No, I don't disagree with carbon pricing. I disagree with the carbon tax on everything for everybody, but I don't disagree with carbon pricing.
What do you think the Conservative Party's position is going to be? Is it going to be completely beholden to the energy sector in Alberta?
The Conservative Party? Well, they can't win. Yeah. They proved that in the last campaign. They can win all the votes west. They can't win government unless they do something in the east, win a couple more seats down in Atlantic Canada, win more in the GTA, and maybe pop off a few more around the Quebec City area. So I think a comprehensive plan, focusing on Canada first and keeping jobs in Canada and focusing on, building a national energy corridors why are we sending our oil through the Panama Canal to come back to Quebec? Why aren't we just building a pipeline across the country? Why are we shipping in from Saudi Arabia, where they beat their women, they kill gay people, and they treat children like animals? Why are we buying their oil when we have oil in the ground here in Alberta, especially with all the folks out west who could use some work? Why aren't we doing that? So I think Canada has to turn inwards and look inwards and look at what made us successful over the last 150 years and get on with some national projects where we know we can create wealth and can create wealth and jobs for all Canadians without outside support from anybody else.
And so what you think obviously has made us successful is energy and accessing that energy and exploiting it. And so therefore what, pipeline to Quebec?
Yeah, I think gas pipelines, oil pipelines, wood, demand for softwood for building homes is highest it's ever been. We have some of the largest, that's green. Our agricultural sector, while Donald Trump is, because it's an election year, he's providing close to $80 billion in direct subsidies, we call it mailbox money, to farmers all over the USA. How Canadian farmers can compete on a global market when the US farmer has about 3 times more money and doesn't even have to meet his or her cost of production. So we have the agricultural industry. I think Canada could become a global agricultural superpower if the government wanted to help there. I mean, the Liberals don't want that because they don't like farmers, because they say farmers kill bees and farmers are industrial and farmers use carbon. But the Liberals like to eat food. I mean, they drink a lot of milk, soy milk, but they do eat food from time to time, and it does come from farms. So we have a lot of great assets. Yeah, our country's been built on the mining and resource industries, and I think we can look towards that to build our future too. In addition to all the great things we're doing, in addition to all the great things we're doing with tech. And tech companies in the major urban areas. Sorry, go ahead, Brian. I cut you off.
Some people think that we're in depression economics kind of situation, and fiscal stimulus is critical. And you've obviously said a lot of negative things about Trudeau and his spending. What do you think the Conservative plan should be in regards to fiscal stimulus?
Look, if I was the Prime Minister, or if I was advising the Prime Minister, my advice would be this: take a look at the top G7 nations as a whole, and take a look at the top G20 nations as a whole, and find out what the average spending is for the G7 nations per capita for their people in direct support from their governments, and for the G20, and let's stay somewhere in the middle, so that relatively speaking, the debt that we take on is not relatively more than half of the other nations that we're competing against in the world. But instead, this Canadian government is outspending all the G7 nations per capita and all the G20 nations per capita on programs like for the We Charity.
Is that because we had one of the lowest, if not the lowest, debt to GDPs to start with?
Well, I don't think we had the lowest debt to GDP. I think if you look at the debt of the provinces, the municipalities, and the federal government, and you look at it like that, like, because other countries measure their entire debt, because some countries don't have provinces, so they don't have provincial debt. If you look at all the debt, we're not the lowest. We never were the lowest. We're moving towards being the highest. That's why in 1995, a great Liberal Prime Minister named Jean Chrétien and a great Liberal Finance Minister named Paul Martin, and they were Liberals, but they were great. They bit the bullet. They took the heat, and they brought us from 66% GDP back down to 30. And now we're going back towards 50. And in a year or two, if Trudeau wins the next election and finds a way to hang on and not be slaughtered by his own cabinet ministers with the candlestick in the kitchen, we could be back at 66% again, which would be outrageous for our children's children.
We're chatting tonight with Nick Kouvalis about Canadian politics. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit more about Canadian politics, but I'm also going to ask him what he thinks about Donald Trump's chances. Stay with us. Well, welcome back. We're chatting with Nick Kouvalis, campaign strategy. Campaign strategist, campaign research is the company that he works with doing polling. He's campaign manager, has been for Rob Ford, John Tory, numerous other different politicians. Nick, you described earlier in our show Kathleen Wynne as Kathleen Wynne's leftist government. You've talked about Justin Trudeau and how much he's spending. And then, I was suggesting that both the Conservative Party federally as well as the Progressive Conservative Party provincially may be socially conservative and very right. Where's the room, or is there room for people of the center? I sort of describe myself as socially progressive and fiscally conservative. Where do I line up in the political spectrum today in Canadian politics?
You'll vote for Aaron O'Toole in the next federal election, I'm sure of it.
Seriously, so you think he's the socially progressive, fiscally conservative, even though the social conservatives elected him?
Yeah, well, listen, I've been polling the Conservative Party for 15 years. 20% of the 21%, 20%, used to be 25. 20% of the membership of the Conservative Party consider themselves social conservatives, which means religious conservatives, 1 out of 5. But the Liberal Party also has religious liberals, just maybe only 1 out of 15 instead of 1 out of 5. And the New Democrats also have some religious people too, probably more than the Liberals do. So I don't think that Canadians need to be worried about that, because I think it's a red herring. I think what we need to be worried about is who can we put in office that maybe doesn't have all the answers to all of the global pandemics that they first face, but is honest, trustworthy, and has integrity. And I think that when the Liberals get into power for a while, they have these massive scandals, and eventually the scandals pile up and they get thrown out of government and the other guys get a chance. And I think we're in that position now.
Some people think that Patrick Brown was taken out of his position because he was too progressive and socially progressive, as well as fiscally progressive, not sort of representing the progressive conservative roots of the past. What's the Progressive Conservative Party in Ontario like today? Is it very right wing or is it centrist?
Well, I mean, look at it. If you talk to really right-wing fiscal hawks, they'll be grumpy about the way Doug Ford's handled government so far because he's not cutting enough. And if you talk to red Tories, they might not like Doug Ford because he's a populist. But a whole bunch of Liberals and a whole bunch of NDP that actually are attracted to populism like Doug Ford. And so the Conservatives, 1/3 of their core base probably isn't the happiest with Doug Ford, but 2/3 is. And I think about half the Liberals are happy with him, and about 1/3 of the NDP voters are happy with him too. So Doug Ford has made the party the Doug Ford PC party. It's certainly not the Tim Hudak PC party, and that certainly wasn't the John Tory PC party. Those were all three very different parties.
Okay, you talked about partisan and populist. So what about Donald Trump? What are his chances, do you think?
Oh, I think Donald Trump has a really good chance to win the election, despite all the media and everyone saying that he doesn't. If you recall, they all said Hillary Clinton was 15 points ahead. And the day before the election, 10 news agencies all gave Hillary Clinton 75%, all the way to 98% chance of winning. And she lost. And I think we're in the same spot now. I think Americans are going to have a clear choice. Do they want, sleepy Joe Biden, who's known to let his hands kind of maneuver all over other people's bodies when he gets close to them, who supports Antifa and fireballing major cities? Or do they want to put up with an arrogant jerk like Trump, who is actually implementing policies that they mostly agree with? I think they'll hold their nose and vote Trump.
Well, fascinating conversation with Nick Kouvalis of Campaign Research, campaign strategist for numerous different people. What a pleasure chatting with you, Nick. And finally, when are we going to go on a trip to the Greek Islands?
Well, listen, I'm starting to plan next year. So, yeah, you're welcome to come.
If people want to access any of your telephone polling or other research, do you have a website they can go to or an email they can contact?
Yeah, www.campaignresearch.com, and you'll be able to see our recent polling and monthly polling. There'll be a big poll coming out tomorrow, a lot to do with education in Ontario, teachers unions, the government. It's commissioned by the Toronto Star, and they'll be putting some stories out tomorrow. So we'll be publishing the whole poll on our website tomorrow afternoon.
Nick Kouvalis, real pleasure chatting with you tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, that's our show for tonight. Thanks for joining us. Brian Crombie Radio, or every Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. on 960 AM, or you can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca, or you can get all my podcasts and videocasts after the fact on my website, briancrombie.com. Thanks. Good night. That was great. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. So about next year, you want to come?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. And so, I haven't booked anything, and I'm flexible.
Would you be with a partner or
yes,
alone?
No, I'd have someone to come with. I'd bring someone.
Okay. Female?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to run some names past you when I get them more confirmed because I want to make sure you're in a group that you're going to get along with really, really well.
Yeah, for sure.
So it'll probably be me and my wife, you and your partner, and then we have enough room for 2 more couples. So
Excellent.
I don't know if you know anybody else that might want to come with you because you know them, or you just leave it to me to figure that out.
I'll talk to a few people. I can't think of anybody right now. And any suggestions on the best time and the best location, let me know. But I'd love to go.
Uh, yeah, okay. Well, I'm gonna start. All things being equal with COVID, July 10th will be the first cruise, and I'll do 6 of them for 1 week each, all the way
Okay.
till August, I think 20th or something like that.
Okay. And would you
So whatever.
suggest if I wanted to do more than a week, should I do 2 with you, or should I go up to Croatia and do something up there?
Oh, on a boat, 2 on a
Yeah.
boat.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Do you normally do boats? Are you used to that?
Not a small boat. So, I've done a 125 person cruise. I did a 15 person
For
boat
two
cruise.
for 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, most people after a week they're ready to get off the boat.
They've had enough.
Yeah, they're usually like ready to get off and go do other things. They get their fill after a week. For
Okay.
me,
So
for me,
maybe that's what I'll do.
it takes me over a month to get to want to get off the boat for a week. Usually I go on it for a month, I get off for a week or two, and then I go back on for a week or two if I can.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, if you want to go to Croatia, that's perfect because what we'll do is at the end of your week, we'll drop you off in Corfu, which is right the most north island on the west side of Greece. It's on the border with Albania. So we'll just drop you. There's an airport there. So we'll be able to drop you off there. You'll be able to take a flight from there, right? Like a 30-minute flight over to where you're going.
Awesome. Okay. Excellent.
Okay,
If
I'll work
you
that out.
if you ever have a poll that you want to publicize, or something you want to talk about, I fill 5 shows a week, so let me know.
Okay, I will let you know. Well, take a look at tomorrow's stuff with the teachers and stuff. I think it's going to be wild. The teachers are not going to be happy with the results.
Really.